Hi, I'm Mark Hummel. I hope you're enjoying the Harmonica Party and the other content that we post on our channel. Check out our Patreon page and join us for exclusive content, early releases of episodes, and some rewards specifically for our Patreon friends. Thanks for helping us keep the blues alive. I'm Mark Hummel, and this is Mark Hummel's Harmonica Party. I'm sitting here with a guy I've known forever, Rick Estrin. And we're going to talk about the blues and Rick's life and all of his adventures and life.
Yeah.
Life in general.
See where it goes.
Yeah, all right. So you just had a birthday?
Yeah, a couple, what's this, November? No, it's December now.
Yeah, it's December
so
now, and you had a
October
birthday.
5th.
October 5th.
Birthday, yeah.
And how old did you turn?
74.
74, right.
Hard to believe, man.
Hard to believe.
I don't know.
Who would have said it could happen?
I don't. Not many people, if that knew me when I was young, man. But yeah, I just love.
Yeah.
I'm Mr. Magoo.
Mr. Magoo just
everything happens
floating through life while everything's
I'm
falling apart around
oblivious,
you.
Man, yeah.
So Rick was born in San Francisco?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And you went to high school in San Francisco?
For about 30 days.
Is that what it was? 30 days?
Yeah, and I was suspended for most of that time.
Wow.
But it wasn't just because I was bad, I was troubled.
Right.
My father died right after I got into 10th grade. So,
okay. So that was kind of
I had just turned 15, I think. And,
right.
And then nobody in the house could kick my ass. And I was also, consumed with grief and guilt and all kinds
What
of
was
shit.
your relationship like with your dad?
Not good.
Not good?
Not good.
Were you pretty rebellious?
I was a hard head, and he was a very
disciplinarian,
rigid type of guy,
right.
and he came up getting his ass kicked, so he thought that was a good, way to make somebody comply. Yeah. And I was a very obstinate kid, and we just butted heads, man. So consequently, I felt guilty when he died, because he would always tell me, "You're killing me," and
right.
tell me, "You're killing your father," and all, because he had a heart condition, man.
No.
So it was not good, but not long after that, I started playing harp, and that gave me something to hang on to.
So were you 15 when you started?
I think I was like 15 when I got one. I don't know that I really started. There was one day, one incident. I might have been 16 by then, when I just, somebody gave me another harmonica. There was this band that lived down the street from my mother's house, and they they all lived together in this house, and they were like a British invasion copy cover band kind of, but I think they were, semi-serious about their career, because they had professional hair and everything, but the guy who was the leader of that band back then, I could kind of sing, and he heard me singing, and he said, "Man, you ought to learn how to play the harmonica." And he gave me a harmonica. And that that same day, I went in a room in his house, like an empty room, and I just stayed in there for hours, and the drugs may have been involved, I'm not sure. But I stayed in that room for hours and hours until I'm sure no doubt about it, I must have sounded like shit, but something clicked in my head where I told myself I could do this.
Right.
I could do this, And I was lucky enough to, I have an older sister.
Right.
She was like 5.5 years older than me. So I and she was kind of like by the time I was about 12, or maybe even younger than that, she was like a little beatnik, kind of, you know.
Was that Deborah?
Baby beatnik. No, Diane. Deb's just a couple years younger than me, but she was like a beatnik, you know, in high school, and she had a couple Jimmy Reed albums. She had albums by Nina Simone, Mose Allison.
Wow.
She had a couple of Mose Allison records I really dug in.
Right.
And she had, and those Jimmy Reed records, that was the first blues harmonica I ever heard. And she had a record by, I remember, Big Bill Brunsey.
Wow.
And she had a record by Champion Jack Dupree called Blues from the Gutter. And I dug that record, and I really dug that title.
Right.
Because I
could have been a band title.
The type of, you know, that was just my mentality,
right,
man. I was gravitated to the gutter, man. You know? So I had that also, you know, in my, you know, I've been hearing that stuff. I've been listening to that stuff. So I had, when I started playing, you know, like I said, my father had just died, and it just gave me something. I
Some
needed
relief,
something to focus on.
Right.
I needed somewhere to channel my feelings,
and
something to, you know, occupy
yourself.
And I got, you know, when you're a kid, man, you know, you did the same thing, I'm sure. I mean, I just played all day.
Yeah.
And, And so when you're a kid, and if you put in the time, you can get pretty good pretty quick.
Yeah.
So I, like a fucking little Harrell, man. Harold.
Oh, man.
Yeah, man. You see how good that guy's getting?
He's incredible.
You know, it's just,
he's incredible.
You just watched it happen so quick.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, so you can get good quick.
Yeah.
And I started getting positive, you know, reactions from people for it. And that meant the world to me then, because I was a fuck up, basically. You know, I was just a fuck up, and I needed, you know.
So did your friends like dig what you were doing as far as music? Or did they not kind of
I think at first I got on everybody's nerves, but I think after a while, a couple of my friends, I mean, we were, you know, I was also into drugs at the time, you know, and I got into, you know, kind of hard drugs and stuff.
You were into hard drugs as a teenager?
Yeah. When I was 15, we were shooting crank, me and my friends, and then I got hepatitis.
Wow.
And we all did, and I was in the hospital and stuff, and then I didn't do any crank for a while because I was scared to, maybe a few months or something. And then when I tried it again, something had happened and my metabolism changed or something, and I hated it, and it made me feel horrible. So consequently, I only tried it about 7 or 8 more times. and then the last time I tried it, I was like, fuck. And I was with this friend of mine who had the same timeline with it that I did, and he felt the same way, you know. And we were both going out of our mind. I remember we were walking down 8th Street, drinking Ripple, man, just pounding down bottles of Ripple, just trying to take the edge off. And then all of a sudden he goes, "Man, I know what we can do," and
heroin.
Yeah, and that was. So
what year was that? Do you remember? Was that 68?
Probably 68, 68, 68.
Because that's when I heard heroin kind of moved into the
68, yeah.
Wow.
That was 68, because I was that year.
So were you into the hippies or not really?
Oh, when it first started, I kind of was. And then once I got into more of, once I got into blues,
then you did
really got into blues. Then I was like too cool for
too cool for school.
Yeah, I was an idiot, man. You know, I mean, I was such an idiot that, like, you know, I was just so into it, and I wanted to be this thing so bad.
Part of
that, you know, I wouldn't even listen to any white people or anything, and I just was just a snob. Even before I could do anything that was worth anything, I was a snob.
Right.
You know? So just, you know, but kids are silly.
Yeah,
man,
no,
you
I know. I
so-
was the same way, man. I just stopped listening to the white guys after I found the old cats.
But yeah, so yeah, I did. So for I don't know how long, man. I mean, by the time, well, I mean, when I met you, I was on methadone maintenance.
Right, I remember,
you know?
yeah. And that was like 74, I think?
74,
75?
I think it was 75 or 76.
I think you're right,
because I was in Chicago most of the time from 70 to the end of 75,
Right.
I think. So, but yeah, and so.
And I think you might have just been back for a minute when I met you. Is that right?
Maybe so.
Yeah.
I kept going back and
Yeah.
forth.
I remember you had an eye patch on.
I was trying to figure out how to make my eyes I was trying to
Correct your vision.
Yeah, trying to
right.
correct my vision,
Right.
man, because I didn't have glasses
Right.
for a long time.
And you had like a wandering eye or something,
Yeah,
didn't you?
yeah.
Right.
I still
Carol
do.
had that
I
too.
still do.
Carol had that too.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was such a great, story, because I called. I've told you this a million times, but I called up this guitar player, and he was like, he had a little ad in the paper or something that said, "Wanted blues harmonica player." I thought, oh, good, this is my chance. And I called a guy up, and he goes, "Yeah, I'm really into blues harmonica, and I'm looking for somebody, but this guy Rick Estrin just called me, and he says he plays, so he's going to be playing with me tonight." So I came down to your gig, and you're wearing a green army coat, and you were playing, and this guy was just like, he was a Jimi Hendrix wannabe, and the guy was like playing at a zillion miles an hour. This black guy, he thought he was Jimi Hendrix. He was just playing loud as shit, man, and you're playing like through the PA, and you couldn't hardly hear you. And so I just walked up to you, and I introduced myself to you, and you go, "Yeah, let's go outside." And the guy had a great big like wash basin with all the money.
Oh, like a tip jar?
Yeah,
thing?
a tip jar or a big old wash basin. You just go up to it and you just grab a boatload of money and stick it in your pockets and split right in the middle of the gig.
Go back.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
That was
Man.
great, though.
I was.
I think we hung out at the donut
Yeah,
shop or something.
I think we did. We
Yeah.
went across the street to that donut shop and talked about
Well,
records.
we were out on the street and we're blowing
Oh,
hard.
we're playing?
Yeah, we were
Oh,
playing.
okay.
And I remember I was playing the Creeper for you. You go, "Wow, you're doing it like he does it live. You're doing a bunch of stuff I never heard before."
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
But
Yeah, man.
But I want to say you hooked up with Charlie. It seems like about a year later, wasn't it?
Yeah.
With Charlie Baty?
Wasn't long after I came back from Chicago. I mean, I don't know if I was there for a visit or what, but like the end of '75, I came back, and I came. Yeah, this is the weirdest story ever, man. Well, close anyway. It trips me out whenever I think about it, because anyway, so I came back to San Francisco, had a drug habit.
Right.
I got signed up for methadone maintenance again.
Yeah, and that's when I met. You were definitely on methadone.
Yeah, again. You know, that was like the second time I was on it for an extended period of time, and that was in the Tenderloin where the clinic was, and I met this chick that was on it, that lived upstairs from the methadone clinic, and so hey, you know,
How convenient.
yeah, I mean that was attractive to me,
Yeah.
you know, and plus she was, you know, a sporting lady, you know,
Right.
So, you know,
You had it made.
yeah, well, that's
For a minute.
That was my mentality
Right.
at the time, but the problem was that mentality wasn't working for me anymore, you know.
Right.
And and she was a good person, man. She was a talented musician too. You
Really?
know? She could play piano, she could play guitar, she sang really good, and she could write songs and stuff. But you know, she was a dope fiend, and
She's still alive?
No, she died, but I did hear from her. She lived longer than we thought.
expected,
She
yeah,
did,
wow.
And I did hear from her. She was from New Jersey, and she had moved back to New York. But yeah, she sent a letter to Alligator at one
Wow.
point. Yeah, that was several
Crazy.
years ago. But anyway, so that was my life. You know, I would go, you know, come down, wake up in the morning, have some coffee, go downstairs, get my methadone, you know, wait around for my juice to kick in, you know, sit around and tell lies with all the other dope fiends there was a Chinese coffee shop across the street, and just sit in there, and all the Jay Peterson called it the methadone for lunch bunch, and so I would do that, you know, that was my routine. And so, but after about, I guess I had been living with her for maybe less than a year, you know. And I was standing, and there was this other guy on methadone named Walter Black, who was from Houston, Texas, and he had known, I don't know if he knew him, but he just was a fan of Travis Phillips, who I used to play with.
Right.
And he, so when I told him, I asked him if he knew Travis, and he was like all impressed that, you know, I told him I used to play with him. And so that gave me some status with him, right? So then he was a good guy, and he was, you know, he was one of my friends on the methadone program there. So and there was this other guy. So I'm standing out in front of the methadone clinic after a few months on it with Walter Black and this other guy, Buster Dubonnet. And Buster Dubonnet was a dealer, and he was also, I think he was Creole or something, you know, so he had, you know, the pretty dude, you know.
Right.
And this we're just standing on the sidewalk, and this bookmobile pulls up to the methadone clinic. And this bookmobile had like a TV screen on the outside of it that would show movies, you know, or show whatever, I don't know. I don't think they didn't have videotape then, but it was playing this movie, The Blues According to Lightning Hopkins.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So we're just standing there looking at this movie, and there's this one part where Billy Beiser
is crying in the pillow,
drunk, and he's laughing and crying, rolling on the floor and playing the harp, right? So, you know, and by that time I was like 25 or something, but I was still extremely immature. so I got like this attitude, and I'm going, man, shit, I play better than that motherfucker, you know. And Buster Dubonnet, under his breath, he goes, yeah, sure, you're right. To look away, like, you know. But in that moment, I just got mad at myself, man.
Yeah.
Like,
for saying that, you mean?
No, I got mad at myself for wasting my fucking life.
Oh,
man.
I see, yeah.
You know.
Right.
And prior to that, probably even before I met you, I just got back to town, and I went with Sonny Lane.
Right.
Oh, he had a red Eldorado.
Right,
He
I
just
remember
got
that,
it.
yeah.
And I went with Sonny Lane to go see Luther Tucker play.
Right.
And we went with Sylvia,
Yeah.
little Walter's sister, Sylvia, and Lula.
Right, the other sister.
Right, and so we went with these two chicks to go to this show and stuff, and at that gig, I saw Little Charlie, who I had met before when he, like a few years before.
Oh, at the Muddy.
Well, no, I met him. I saw him there too, but when I first met him, he just called me up out of the blue. Gary Smith had given him my phone number because he wanted to meet me, you know.
Right. Right.
And at the time I was like, man, I'm not playing much. I think I was on methadone the first time then.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing nothing. Nobody knows how to play this shit, man. Fuck it out. You know?
Right.
I had a terrible, just pitiful, I was a pitiful fucking idiot, man. And so when I went to that Luther Tucker gig a couple years later or whatever, and I saw Little Charlie again, he told me he had moved to Sacramento and that he was playing more guitar now, and that maybe if he wrote down his phone number on a matchbook cover.
Right.
And he said, I might be ready to try to play together, because we talked about maybe playing together, because he had learned all these guitar parts that
Right.
go with a harp to show guys that were playing
Right.
with him, because he was
Right.
a harmonica player.
Yeah.
So he gave me his phone number on this matchbook cover, and he said, maybe give me a call in about 6 months, and I think I might be ready to try playing with you then. So when I was out in front of that clinic looking at that bookmobile and making an idiot out of myself, and I got pissed off, I know, what, I can remember thinking in my mind, man, fuck this, I can do something,
Right.
I know how to do something. And so I went around the corner, up the stairs, went in that apartment, and I went right to that matchbook cover, man. That would have been there for 6 months.
Really?
I hadn't even thought about it, and it
Yeah.
was just right there in this. I knew exactly where it was suddenly.
Wow.
And I went right to that matchbook cover, and I called them up, and I don't know when it was, a week later. We had some shitty gig a week later, and I went up there on a Greyhound, and I
Wow.
did that a couple of different times.
Yeah.
I went up there on the Greyhound.
Yeah.
And then it seemed like it was going to work, and we decided we'd try it. And Steve Samuels said I could stay on his couch,
Wow.
and that's what happened, man.
And now you guys had, I think, Kenny Ray playing
he was playing
as
guitar.
well,
He was
so
playing
that Charlie could play harp.
Yeah, Charles.
And then that way you guys
Right.
would swap out and do like half the set each.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
Charles, how it was for a while when Kenny was in the band was Charles would play the first set on harp,
Right.
and Kenny would play, and then after that, he'd bring me up, and then I'd play the rest of the night, and,
Right.
and him and Kenny would both play guitar.
Right. The other thing is I remember Charlie was not a good singer, so it was like, I mean,
I always thought that,
yeah.
but like later on, I listened to some old
tapes?
recordings of him,
Uh-huh.
and he didn't have an unpleasant voice.
Yeah.
He didn't. I don't know what it was. It was something.
Maybe it was just
about
kind of a stiffness or something. to it.
something.
Yeah.
I don't
yeah.
know what it was.
Yeah.
But I was surprised that
Huh.
yeah, because I remembered it like that. But then when I heard it later, I was like, hey, it sound, there was something
Sounded okay.
kind of okay about it.
Huh.
I mean, it wasn't, it
Wasn't god-awful.
Wasn't Bobby Blue Bland or anything. but and then too, at that time, like I said, when I was younger, I could kind of sing,
Yeah.
So,
No, I remember.
So that
Yeah.
there was more of a contrast,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you kind of had an entertainer's attitude all
Yeah,
along.
well, because as
Yeah.
a kid,
Yeah.
when I wasn't being a drug idiot, I was hanging around with Rodger Collins.
Right.
I had too much respect for him to bring that shit around him, man. I
Right.
was always, but he was a great entertainer, and he was
Right.
very generous with me, man.
And I think, wasn't the first guy you sat in with Lowell?
yeah,
Lowell Fulson,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was the first guy I ever
Right.
sat with. That
And that was in like Hunter's Point or
that was
something?
at the Club Long Island.
Right.
Yeah, I went to see
And
Lowell.
you
'cause
said you got a gig out of it.
I did.
Yeah.
At the time he had a record on KDIA called Blues Pain.
Right,
And
right.
I really dug that song.
remember
man. I
that,
heard
yeah.
that on the advertisement on the radio
Yeah.
that he was going to be there. So I went there,
Right.
and I mean that, and I mean, I stuck out, man, but I'm pretty sure this was before Dr. King got shot, so it was a little different.
Okay, so it was like 67 maybe?
Yeah,
or early 68?
Something. Yeah. I can't. I wish I was better with that stuff. But yeah, so I was with this friend of mine that was a talker,
right?
And he somehow talked his way into them letting me sit in. And Lowell was really cool, man, because there was a house band. He could have stuck me up there with, without him.
Right.
They introduced him, ladies and gentlemen, start time, reconsider baby, black nights and all that stuff. And he got up there and he goes, before I get into my show, I'm going to bring up this young man to play the harmonica. And people were like, what the fuck, looking, because they were, people were laughing and stuff.
Right,
I mean, and then I got like halfway into about a verse and a half, the whole place just went out of their mind because I was a novelty,
Well, I think it was it could have been also that, and I mean, this was my experience, was that when you did that, people kind of could feel if you were really into it.
Oh, they could
feel if you would listen to the music and you knew what you were doing.
Absolutely. They could tell I was for real.
Yeah. And I think that made a huge difference with the audience.
Absolutely. So then, so after that, the guy, Emmett Kennedy, that owned the club, gave me a gig opening for ZZ Hill.
Wow.
And I opened for ZZ Hill in that club for a week.
Wow.
And so, because they would, it was like an old time floor show, kind of almost like vaudeville days, where they would have they'd have a band that played for, because it was a nice nightclub,
Right.
They'd have a band that played for people dancing and stuff, and they'd play the latest hits and stuff, and then they would have, first they'd bring up somebody like sometimes a comedian or like
shake dancer,
something like that, and like that night with Lowell, the novelty act that opened the show was this guy Iron Jaw Wilson.
Right. You told me about that.
He would pick up chairs and tables in his teeth and stuff with drum rolls and stuff, and make a big dramatic thing out of it, and he threw one chair by one leg, and then he hooked two chairs together and did two chairs, and then for a finale he'd pick up a couple chairs and a table, all in his teeth.
He must have had a great dentist.
Oh man! But what was really a trip too about that, and I know I'm going all over the place. I apologize.
This is funny.
But I saw him like. I think maybe, I don't know if Red Fox was on strike from Sanford and Son or what was happening, but it was a few years later, and he had a summer, how they would have those summer replacement for shows, like they'd have a show that in between seasons, so they had a summer replacement variety show where it was the Red Fox show, variety show, and every week Iron Jaw Wilson was on there.
Wow.
Red Fox would be like a newscaster, and he would, or something like that, and he would say, Henry Kissinger is negotiating right now with Khrushchev and blah blah blah, and he'd be like, what do you think of that, sir? And Iron Jaw Wilson would go like, well, can Henry Kissinger do this? And he'd pick up some shit in his teeth, man. But I was like, wow, man, he's
left field.
Iron Jaw's on TV, he's famous, man.
He finally made it.
It was great. Cool, man. So they would have, and then another time I went there. This was before I was working there.
Right.
I went there, and they had this guy named Geronimo who would roller skate on tabletops, and he'd jump from the tabletop. These little, they had the little round bar type tables, cocktail lounge tables, little round tables, and he would leap from table to table on roller skates.
Freaking awesome, man.
Yeah, that was, man. I'm so glad, you know, that I got to be around.
Right,
For
stuff like
some
that
stuff,
that's gone.
That stuff is
Yeah,
just
that
long
stuff's
gone. I mean, I
long
was at
gone,
the
yeah.
tail end
Right.
of it, you know. But
Yeah.
they would have a novelty act like that. Then they would have like a singer, usually somebody singing the hits of the day, you know,
Right.
some good singer, you know. And then they would have the headliner, you know. And that week, when I first went there, Lowell was the headliner. And then when I got the gig there, ZZ Hill was the headliner. And I was like the guy that, you know, like, because I'm a white guy doing blues, man.
Right.
So I was like a, you know,
The
like
freak.
Like, yeah, I was
Yeah.
some.
Did you get to know
oddity.
ZZ Hill at all?
Not really. I wasn't scared of
Just kind of
being there,
intimidated?
but I was intimidated
Yeah.
by, you know, fuck that ZZ Hill, you
Right.
know. And he was nice to me. He was super nice, man,
Yeah.
you know. But I
Right.
But another thing that happened to me while I was right when I was just going to start there, like maybe the day before or a couple days before I was going to start my week-long run there,
Yeah.
I was at my friend's house who was the guy that I went there with to see Lowell. And I was at his house and I heard like some blues guitar coming through the wall, you know. And it was an apartment building, and it was this. My friend was a criminal, and you know, I don't know if he was even a good guy, but he was my friend. And this whole apartment building was all hustlers and, you know, of different types and
Right.
stuff. And I heard this guitar coming through the wall, and I was just naive, you know. And I went out, and it was right across the hall. So I just knocked on the door, and it was Filmore Slim.
Wow.
And that's when I met Fillmore, and he invited me in.
Yeah.
And I told him I was playing there at the club on Island,
Right.
starting, you know, the next night or something.
Right.
And he came to the gig with Rodger Collins.
Wow.
He had this other guy with him, all kind of diamonds and process.
So is that how
and
you met
everything.
Rodger Collins?
Yeah. And,
Wow.
And I thought, oh, this guy must be a pimp too, but he wasn't. He was, you know, he was an entertainer, and I mean,
Right.
he had a famous record that I already knew. I didn't know who he was when
What
I
a
saw
trip,
him.
man.
Yeah. So that's how I met him, and that's how I met Fillmore.
Yeah.
And that was really
So how old were you when
started
you
in
met Fillmore? Were you like
18.
18?
I think I
Wow.
was 18. He always says, hey, he was in my band when he was 15, but I don't.
It felt like you were
think I was
15 to
18.
him.
Yeah, I think I was 18.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Now, Rodger Collins is somebody you actually worked with for how long? A year or two?
Oh, no. On and
real
off,
short?
I would do some little stuff for him.
Didn't you go to England with him?
No. I went to England. This girlfriend of mine took me to England.
Oh.
But
I thought it had something to do with Rodger
no,
Collins.
no.
Oh, okay.
But Rodger, I did. You know, I worked with Fillmore quite a while. I mean,
Really?
I worked with Fillmore like 5 nights a week for about 6 months.
Really?
At this one club called the Playpen on Divisadero Street in the Fillmore
Really?
district. And with Fillmore and Travis Phillips.
Oh, so that was them
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
Travis-
realize that.
That's where I met Travis. He
Oh, I
was
didn't
Fillmore's
realize that.
guitar player. You know,
Oh, I didn't realize that.
And
man.
then Fillmore left that gig, and because they were building the Alaska pipeline,
Right.
So he took a bunch of ladies up to Alaska,
Right.
and he left the gig. So, but then me and Travis still stayed there, and we had that gig.
And he
for-
sang.
Travis sang his
Sang
ass
his
off.
ass
He
off,
could
yeah.
play great, man. He
Right.
was a monster. He would have been, if he wouldn't have died so young. You know, he had some drug problems too.
Now, did he put out like 45s
He
or
made
something?
some 45s,
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
made some, and there's also some stuff that came out that hadn't been released on, came out on Fly Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah, on those albums. And he also was on, this is when he was a teenager, man. He played on some Clifton Chenier. He was in Clifton's
So
band.
was he from Houston or
He
something?
was from Houston, yeah.
Okay.
And he was killer, man.
Yeah.
And he had, and like I remember from when I was in Chicago, I went and saw Freddie King. He must have been a good guy, man. He was like, this was when he had Leon Russell records out.
Right,
He was
Shelter stuff,
playing
yeah.
festivals, and
Right.
it was a big deal. And he came to Chicago and played on the West Side with at Tom's Musicians Lounge, which was T.J. McNulty, who was a drummer, and he had been Freddie King's drummer back in the day, way back,
Yeah.
and Big Mojo, who I knew from, because I
Right.
worked with
The bass
him in
player,
Sam
yeah.
Lay's band.
Yeah.
So TJ and Big Mojo and Freddie King was a trio back in way, in the
What a trip.
early 50s, mid 50s or
Yeah.
something. And so it was TJ's bar, and Freddie King came in and played a Wednesday night just to
Wow.
help his pal out, right?
That's awesome.
So I was there, and Freddie King would come out on the sidewalk, and I asked him if he ever knew Travis, and he goes, "Oh man," he goes, "when I first went to Houston, Texas, that guy had the baddest band in town." And
Wow.
telling me all how great he could sing and how great he could play and all that
What a
stuff.
trip,
It was cool, man. Yeah, so
Yeah,
Travis
that's pretty
was,
heavy.
Travis was tough, man. And two, like years after I don't know, I'm not good with time, but less than 10 years ago, I remember asking Lazy
Right.
Lester, if he knew Travis, and he goes, "Oh man, I always wondered what happened to that cat, man." And then he goes, I remember watching him play, man, and then he did like an impression of, and it looked just like the way Travis would look when he would play, because when he would play, he
Yeah.
would never look at his fingers. He'd just be looking up.
That's
like
heavy
this,
duty,
man.
yeah.
He'd
That's a guy that
never
plays
look at his
guitar a
hands,
lot.
man. Never look at his hands, man.
Yeah. What a trip,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, after Fillmore went to Alaska, Travis and I kept that gig for about 6 more months. And during that time too, because I was just into it, man, I just learned to play,
Right.
and getting some, good. I mean, it was like I was into something,
Right.
And that's when I met Jerry Portnoy.
Okay.
Because
So that was 68 then.
yeah, because he was in San Francisco. He got out of the army, and
Right.
his sister was living in San Francisco.
Right.
So he came to San Francisco, and he was just trying to learn to play too,
Yeah.
And we met at there used to be a little record store on Stanton and Frederick in the Haight called the New Geology Rock Shop.
Now, is that the one where you told me you met Al Blake
I
one
did.
time?
I met him in there too.
Right.
But I met Jerry in there.
Right.
And we became pals. We were both trying to figure it out, and I'd
Right.
figure something out, and he'd figure something out. We'd show each other
Yeah.
what we were learning.
That helps.
And everything. It
Yeah.
was just cool, man. And
Yeah.
then, and I had a gig, so
Right.
he would come see me play with Travis and
Oh,
Fillmore
okay.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is where I met Al Blake too, and that was a trip too, man.
Yeah, you told me
Might
he was
have met
showing
Al
you the
Blake
albums too.
before that, because I'm looking at these records, and he asked me, he goes, you like that stuff? And blah. I think I was looking at a Junior Wells album or something,
Right.
and he took me way across town to where he lived. I mean, he lived way over in the Mission District.
I didn't even know
Outer
he
Mission.
lived up here.
He lived in San Francisco.
Wow,
and
I
he
had
lived
no
he
idea.
lived on this little tiny alley street called Godeus, and it was a like almost famous kind of location because it had the cheapest rent in the whole city.
Really?
This one place where he lived was like a tiny little house
What a
in
trip.
an alley, and it was like $50 a month or something. And anyway, he took me over there, and he played me 45s and 78s
Wow.
and shit that I had never heard, man.
Right.
And it was just I was
Opened
just,
it
like,
up.
blowing. It was just blowing my mind. I was
Yeah.
so into that shit,
Right.
and I was just hearing all this because back then, you remember, all you had was like the best of Muddy Waters,
Right,
the best
right,
of Little
right.
Walter. There wasn't.
No, here in the
but
45s.
having all those 45s,
Yeah.
man, were and
Right. And Little Charlie was collecting them too.
he may have been, but not then, man. Like back then.
Really?
Well, if I was 18, he was like 14.
Oh, you're right. You're right about that. Yeah.
So he,
Yeah.
I mean, he was into it. He was into it then,
Yeah.
but I don't know if he was
Not to that
collecting
degree,
45s.
yeah. Right.
But Al Blake had all that stuff, and then I remember too. he, you know, I had to leave, or he, you know, he was kicking me out or something, and he just right before I left, he played like a John Lee Williamson kind of intro, like Junior Wells or something like that, and was hitting the split, you know, the partial seventh chord thing, and the octave on the 1 and the 4 and stuff, and I was like, I didn't know how to do that yet, you know, and I was like, how'd you do that? And he's like, hey, I can't tell you everything. But
I was lucky because I remember I had the same problem. I was like, I'm going, what do? Do you put tape over the middle too? I couldn't figure it out because I heard Taj do it. I actually heard Taj Mahal was the one
all the time.
And it was like that's where I really heard it.
Yeah.
And I heard that and I went, there's got to be how do you figure out how to do that? And this friend of mine goes, oh man, all you do is put your tongue in between the two notes, you know?
But that was...
Well, that's a trip, man. I remember that. Yeah, that you're telling me. Now, did you used to go to Strawquitz's record store too?
What happened was, right around that same time when it was probably a little bit after meeting Al Blake there.
Right.
And but during that period of time when I was playing with Travis and Fillmore, like that was on, the playpen was on like Divisadero and Grove or Divisadero and Fulton, up there.
By the head.
And I lived on Oak and Scott, which is like, you know, just 1 block off Divisadero. So I would walk to the gig, you know. And on Page and Scott, which was like 1 block away from me, was this record store called Jack's Record Cellar. And he had a lot of weird oddball records and not a whole bunch of blues, but old jazz and old weird stuff, man. You know, there was some blues in there. But Chris Strawquitz in the bass had rented the basement from this guy, and he had the basement. He used that to store all the duplicates of his private collection. So when I talked to him, I saw him, just happened to see him pull up there in his car, and he was trying to catalog all this shit. And he let me come in there and just go through all that stuff, and you know, I'd be like, well, how much for this? And you know, some chest 45, little Walter 45, go $1, you know, or I can remember like a Cobra 45, he'd be, oh, that's pretty rare, $3, you know. So anytime I saw his car there, I would go down there. I just wish I would have had money then, you know, because I mean, I didn't have, you know, I didn't have money, but that was really cool too, you know.
Well, you know, it's funny. Me and Paul Duquette were talking about just the whole thing of like when we all started playing, because it was all pre-internet. You know, I mean, nothing was easy to find. So when you found something like an alternate take or something like that, it was like this big deal. It was such a big deal to get a hold of that. It was thrilling.
Oh, hell yes.
It was totally thrilling. And I think people don't really know what that was like when we were learning to play.
Come on, young people of today.
Those young kids of today, they have no idea what it was like going through all those records.
But it's true because, but for this reason, I think a lot of people today, you know, there's probably more guys that can play pretty well now than ever before because there's so much more information and being freely, you know, back when we were learning, nobody'd tell you anything, man. They'd tell you the wrong shit on purpose. You know? But now there's so much, you know, you can just go on your phone and find, you know, 5 alternate takes of Off the Wall or something, you know. And there's so much there that I think people learn, a lot of people, maybe not everyone, but I think people learn in a more surface kind of way. They learn these licks because there's so much to learn. Whereas when we were trying to figure stuff out, you had the best of Little Walter, you had the best of Muddy Waters, you know, you had Down and Out Blues, and so there's, you know, what is that, like 36 songs or something, and so you would zero in on stuff and try to learn the little tiny little nuances and the little things that, to me, is the stuff that really makes it live.
Right,
A lot of times,
the detail.
details
Yeah.
is the stuff that makes it live. And also back then, even before this time, but this is before I was playing with Travis and Fillmore and all that stuff, I went to see Muddy at the Avalon Ballroom.
Right.
And
that
was when Paul had just joined the band.
Right.
And it was Span.
Right.
And SP and Pee-wee, Snake, and Sammy. They didn't even have a bass player.
Right. Wow.
And maybe those guys would switch off and would play bass.
Yeah.
But I went and saw that band, and I met Paul on the break, or I guess it wasn't a break because
they did one set. I think. Yeah.
So I met Paul and
Paul Osher.
Yeah, Paul Osher, and I was just blown away, man, because, like I said, I wanted to be real. I wanted to play like the real shit,
And he was probably the first white harp player you saw, really.
Well, I mean, I had seen, I'd seen the guys that were.
Had you seen Butterfield and guys like that?
I'd seen Butterfield, and I think I'd seen Charlie and stuff, but they didn't have bands that were that low down.
Right.
Or Charlie did later on. He had Lewis and Dave and stuff, but seeing that, I mean, come on, Span and Muddy and SP, man,
that's a heavy band.
And see this guy, and he was like young, man. He was like 20 years old or something.
So is he like 1 year old or 2 years older?
He's a couple years older than me. I was about 17. He was maybe 21 or something. He always lied about how old he was. But so, and I just dug. I mean, I was blown away, man. It was everything about it, the whole effect of that thing, man, because they were all up there, man, the processes and gold teeth and the lights.
The Nehru jackets.
Lights hitting the gold teeth, and they're all wearing, red brocade Nehru jackets with gold medallions and shit, and they all up there looking like they'd kill you, man. I loved that, man, because I wanted people.
Everyone had a pistol on them.
I wanted people to be scared of me, you know. And when I met Paul, he, for some reason, I don't know what it was, but he broke out a harp and he started playing like the last verse of Juke.
Right.
And he was, had his hand was using his hands to shape notes, and I could just tell that that was the biggest eye opener, because I could tell, okay, it's not about licks.
Right.
It's not, there was texture.
Like a float to it.
Yeah, there was texture and the buoyancy that, because he was tongue blocking and he had a groove in
So
there.
were you tongue blocking at that point?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I wasn't, but I heard it, and I knew that. That's when I.
Did he show you how to do it?
No, he didn't. But that's when I knew it wasn't about licks.
Right.
Because prior to that, I'd just been trying to learn licks.
Right.
And that's when I knew there was a lot more to it.
Right.
And the tongue blocking came later when me and Jerry were trying to figure shit out, and I think there was this guy, he moved to England, named Johnny Mars.
Oh, right. He's still there, I think.
Yeah,
he's still there.
He lived around there, and he played with his tongue, but he wanted to play, he didn't want to play that way no more. He wanted to play like fast and
right, like Jimi Hendrix.
But Jerry heard it, I think, and he thought, man, I think that's in me. So I can't remember exactly how it happened, but somehow through that, we figured that out. And then my girlfriend, who I was living with at the time there on Oak and Scott, and I think my gig with Fillmore had ended, and Travis had ended, and my girlfriend wanted to go to England. And I said, man, shoot, I'd like to go to England. She goes, well, I've been thinking about it. I could probably get you a ticket, and we could go together. So I went with her to England, and
That's when you were Coastin' Hank.
well, that was just a name that Rodger gave me.
Oh,
Rodger
okay.
Collins gave me that
Right.
name and put that on a poster.
Right.
'Cause he didn't like my name.
Right.
You know, so he thought that sounded like a good name. You know, that was actually, I think I suggested it, and that was actually a dope dealer that I knew down on Fillmore Street, Coastin' Hank.
Oh, really?
They called him
Okay.
Coastin' Hank because he was always fucked up. And, you know, but she took me to England, and we had a thing they used to call it an excursion ticket, where you know, you could not change it to come back sooner. You know, when we were like, it was a month,
Right.
or something, we had to be there. And while we were there, you know, she sort of ran out of a sense of humor and left and dumped me, man. And she left me in London, where we had a flat that we had rented for the month.
Right.
And she just left me.
So you had to
there,
kind of fend for yourself.
I had no money, I had nothing. I had a ticket home, but my ticket home, you know, I couldn't use it until that day. Until that day, right? So I was in England and I had nothing to do, and that's when I just played all day, every day.
So how did you eat?
And you know, I mean, I had like a little bit of money. I would go also. Here's how I would eat too: is there was a record store called Dobell's Records. You remember seeing that name?
No.
Like Blues Unlimited and stuff. They
Not
were
really.
advertising
Yeah.
there. And that was a cool record store, man. They had all those old, you know, remember when England had
Oh,
the
yeah.
really hip records?
Oh, yeah.
Man?
Hell yeah.
The
Red
albums
Lightning and
stuff.
all that.
Yeah. So they had all the
Syndicate Chapter.
I think, this was even before. I'm trying to think of what these records were, because it was before Red Lightning.
Before Syndicate Chapter?
Yeah. But I don't know what it was, but some of it was just English. You know, they were
Bootlegs.
released by these were maybe released by the real record company, but for England. You know,
okay.
Like
So
RCA
it'd be
Bluebird
Decca or
albums
something like that.
Decca
Yeah.
or something like that. But anyway, they had all these killer records, and there was a guy that worked there every day that was into the shit, and I met him, and I think I showed him my poster with
Coastin'
Hank. And so I would hang out there. He hit me to a little Greek restaurant around the corner that was real cheap.
Yeah.
And I just
learned how to do it,
and
get by.
I made friends with a harp player named Paul Rowan, and he at the time he was playing with Long John Baldry.
Wow. Yeah.
And super nice guy, man.
Yeah.
And a good player. He could do some shit that I couldn't do at that time, you know.
Wow.
He had a little side tongue thing. And
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And he kind of went off as a rocker and passed away. Yeah.
Wow.
But he was a good guy, man.
Yeah.
He took me to his family's house. I would eat over there, you know.
Yeah.
And just it was like Blanche du Bois.
So now,
the kindness of strangers.
The kindness of strangers. So when you came back from England, is that when you went to Chicago?
Yeah, because I felt like, man, because I practiced.
I'm ready to go.
So much, man. While I was there, I was getting I thought, I felt like, man, I got
I'm ready.
I got this tone, and I'm playing, I'm tongue blocking all up and down.
So did you fly back to San Francisco and then Chicago, or
I
how
went
did you
back
do
to
this?
San Francisco, and I was there for a while. I can't remember, and then when I think, okay, I went back to San Francisco. Here's what happened. Okay, I went back to San Francisco, for the however th time developed another drug habit.
Right.
And then
So you weren't shooting dope in England?
No.
Okay.
And then, I was on and off for years, man.
Yeah.
Just, which was lucky because there were times when
could have
I was
really done
able-
your liver
There was
in,
times, well, no, I did do my liver.
You did do
but
your liver in.
It's okay now, but
Right.
but I, you know, there were times when I could be productive and I could learn something and I could focus on something besides, like, you know, how am I going to not get sick, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, I didn't bring that shit around everybody. I had a set of friends that were dope fiends, and I had music
Straight
people,
friends, yeah, right.
you know,
Yeah.
and some, you know, straddled the fence like
In
me,
between,
you
yeah,
know.
right.
But yeah, so I came back, and then I don't know, I got some girl to buy me a plane ticket because Jerry had gone back to Chicago, and he was his father got sick, and he had to go back home to Chicago. So he went back to Chicago, and he was sending me postcards from Chicago, telling me, "Oh man, this is so great! You need to come back here, man.
Right.
This is killer, man. I sat in with the Aces last night,
Right,
you know, all
right.
this stuff." So I thought, well, you know, I'm losing my shit here. I'm falling apart. My girlfriend dumped me. I might as well go
Try it.
go back there, man, because I ain't doing shit here. So,
Right.
So I found this other girl that, you know, bought me a plane ticket.
Now, did she live back there?
She lived in San Francisco, but she was from Chicago.
Okay.
And she bought me a plane ticket to Chicago, and then she was going to come out there and meet me, and which she did after a while. But she, you know, I wasn't down with meeting her really. I just needed a plane ticket.
Right.
I was.
You're just doing whatever
man,
you could.
I ain't that bad no more, man. I really am not no bad guy.
He's a different person now.
I was, you know, I was troubled. So, you know, yeah, I was, you know.
With a capital T.
Plus, you know, and I'm not blaming nobody. I'm gonna shut up, but you know, I had that kind of an attitude about women from being around,
right?
You know,
Fillmore Slim.
Yeah, street type of people, you know.
Yeah, I
thought that was slick, you know.
Right. So when you got to Chicago, well, how'd you break into that scene?
Oh man, it was just overwhelming right away.
Yeah.
First I kicked, and then I
right
on Jerry's couch for the first time that I did that. I did that twice, kicked on Jerry's couch.
Wow.
But yeah, he was, man, I love that guy.
So
he's seen you brother, man.
He's seen you at your worst.
Brother, he was never a fuck up like that, man, you know, and he, you know, God bless that guy, man.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I felt pretty good, we went to Teresa's on a Monday night, and you know, obviously, like from what we know now and where we are now, yeah, I wasn't that good, but I felt like I was, and I had attitude, and I had tone, I had power, you know.
Right.
And I sat in Teresa's and fucked the place up, man.
Oh, good.
And it was packed full of people.
That's great.
You know?
Yeah. And
I remember Junior Wells telling me, "Man, you're gonna make it, boy. You got soul."
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
that shit, man.
That's awesome.
And it was cool. And then we left there and we rode around with Lewis and Billy Boy.
Right.
Billy Boy.
No, you told me. I thought you told me it was Billy Boy and Otis Clay or something.
No.
Okay.
I never met Otis Clay till way later.
All right.
But Billy Boy and Lewis.
That's awesome.
And Lewis just talked the whole time, man. Lewis was funny as hell, man. and I mean, how cool is that?
That you can't beat
riding
that.
Around
No.
Billy Boy riding around the South Side.
I know.
Billy
with
Boy
Lewis
on
Myers,
his car,
right.
with Lewis Myers just talking, you
awesome.
know, telling me all kinds of fucking, you know, just stuff I'm not going to tell on here because it's not about me. I don't mind revealing stuff about me, but man, he was telling me stuff about people I idolized that was
messed up.
Some, you know, they were troubled people too.
Yeah.
And, but it was just, I was like, how cool is
this?
Yes,
right.
And so, yeah. And then after that, I was going out and, you know, just going out to play. I mean, everything was happening still then, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, at one point, I remember Yeah, I sat in with, and Kerry was playing harp with Muddy then.
Right.
Paul had left, and he came back after that.
Right.
But and Kerry told me, he said, man, I'm gonna quit, man. So if you come down to the Sutherland Hotel,
Right.
you can probably have the gig if Muddy likes you. And so I did that. You know, that next weekend, I went to the Sutherland Hotel, which was on 47th and I think 47th and Drexel, and Muddy was there Friday and Saturday. Willie Meebon was the opening act.
Wow.
That was a nice club.
Yeah, yeah. That was kind of a jazz and
yeah,
blues.
it was a jazz room.
Right,
yeah.
jazz and blues. I've been by it.
And so I guess Kerry introduced me to Muddy. And
Now, didn't Dixon have a hand in this whole thing?
No.
He did.
Willie
Okay.
Dixon, no.
All right.
I never really knew Willie Dixon. I met
Okay.
him.
All right. Okay. I'm confusing.
I think I only really met Willie Dixon when I saw Willie Dixon with Big Walter, but I think when I met Willie Dixon was when Billy was in the band.
Okay.
Because I knew Billy from Chicago.
Right. Did you meet Billy Branch right away too?
It was after this. It might have been the next time I was there, but it was pretty early. Pretty early on. He was like a real young and real innocent.
I want to say
guy.
I think he had moved right, like within a year or two of when you were there.
Yeah. So I met
think,
Billy.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember. Billy always talks about that. Me and Jerry used to laugh at him and all that stuff. But I also told him, I go, man, you stick with this, you're going to get a good gig because, you know.
And then he ended up with Dixon.
And he ended up with Dixon, and he told me, because see, you were right.
Right.
When I saw him.
I remember when I first met him, I mentioned your name and he lit up.
Yeah.
A bunch of guys like that. I mean, well, Osher too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the only reason Osher even talked to me is because I said I knew you.
Yeah, Paul, man.
Because he was going to just shine me on. You know?
I miss that guy all the time,
yeah.
man.
That was like 1980.
I love that fucking guy. But so I went down there, and they had a 4 o'clock license. So that meant they stay. They were open. They got till 4 a.m. And then Saturday night they're open till 5 a.m. So I wait. Muddy said, "Well, I'll call you up." So I wait around, and he never called me up. So I was like, "Damn," So at the end of the night, I go, "Wow, I thought you were going to call me up." He goes, "Oh yeah, I forgot. But come back tomorrow." So he's just trying to see
how dedicated you are.
Yeah. And Jerry was with me.
Oh,
Jerry
interesting.
went there with me. Yeah.
Okay.
And so then I went back Saturday night. I waited around. Then he, called me up about the middle of the evening.
Right.
And I remember I played long distance call, and then that was like, I think it was the end of the set, or maybe it was pretty close to the end of the set. And I got done, and I was like, "Oh man, how did I do?" And I was standing there, and Muddy was at a table with some chicks, and he kind of went like this with his finger, and I walked over to the table, and he stood halfway up, and he goes, "Boy, you out of sight, boy." He goes, you play like a man, boy. So you got that sound, boy. I know that sound when I hear it. That's my sound. And I was like, I was.
You can't get any better than that. You can't get any
so,
better than that.
So, and he gave me his phone number.
Right.
And he took the number where I was staying, but I was staying at the time, with this girl that I was trying to get rid of. I just didn't know what to do, She was the one that bought my plane ticket.
She was the one in Chicago.
Yeah.
Right.
But she was, because I went out there first, and then she came.
Right.
Pretty soon after. And I really didn't, I was a rat, man. But, hey, we all have our path in life. But
so you went back to San Francisco after that?
Yeah, because I kept waiting for him to call me.
Right.
And then I couldn't stand being there no more, and I didn't know what to do. But Bruce Iglauer. This is before Alligator Records or anything.
Right.
He was like worked at
Right,
the
at
Jazz
Kester's,
Record Mart. And he was a neighbor of Jerry's. And he lived close by Jerry, so I had met him because Jerry had him come over, and I remember, you know, because he's like, oh, this guy's great and all that shit. And then I remember I was playing guitar and singing for Aguilar, and he's like, I don't know if I believe you, you know. but anyway, he was at that time, he was Kerry's manager.
Right.
And that was why Kerry was going to quit Muddy, because Bruce was going to manage him, and he was going to book him in and give him a European tour and stuff.
Right.
And so I called Bruce and I asked him, is Kerry going to quit? You know, he told me he's going to quit. Is he going to quit? Because if he ain't quitting, I'm going to go back home.
Right.
And this is really weak, but I don't care. I've talked about it, so I already look bad on here. So I had this other girlfriend. This was the one that dumped me in England. And I missed her. I wanted to go back and beg my way in, man.
Right.
It did not work out, man, at all.
Right.
You know? But that's, you know, I was young, man, you know. And so he said, no, Kerry's not going to quit this European tour. Didn't happen, and so Kerry's not leaving Muddy. So I said, oh, fuck it, I'll go home. You know, eventually he did leave, and Paul came back, but I was back in San Francisco being a fuck up again, feeling sorry for myself. But yeah.
Didn't Muddy eventually call though?
He never called me. He called Sonny Lane one time and asked Sonny about me.
Really?
And then Sonny called me and he goes, did Muddy call you? And I said, no. And he said, well, he's going to call you. And then he never did. And then but that was years later.
Right.
That was when he hired Jerry.
Right.
That was when he hired Jerry. And this is what I think. And I never thought of this until years later.
Did he got you guys confused?
No.
Oh.
That's what I heard too.
Yeah, I'd heard
and
that.
I don't know if that's true or not, but this I believe. Because I had seen him between that time when I was like, 18 or 19, and years later when I was, 20 something, 20, 3, 20, something like that. I had lived in Chicago.
Right.
He had seen me in Chicago. I had sat in with them at the Quiet Night. I had said when I was out here, I sat in with them at Keystone Berkeley,
right,
and all that. I know he dug my playing.
Yeah.
But he saw me fucked up, man.
Oh, so
I might have still been able to play.
But that makes sense then, yeah.
And he could recognize that shit.
Right.
You think you're invisible when you're loaded on junk, man.
Right. But he knew it.
He knew it. And
so he wasn't about to hire somebody.
He had a daughter that died, man.
Oh,
a daughter
my God.
I never knew that until when I was on the methadone program, and I'd be in that coffee shop across the street from the methadone program with the Methadone for Lunch bunch. Right. There was a woman who was from Chicago, and she told me she was friends with his daughter that had died. From as a dope fiend. And even after I heard that, I never put it together.
That's what he's.
That's why he never fucking hired me.
That totally
he
makes sense.
Because he said himself, I don't have to have the best musicians. I could build a musician the average musician with a hammer and a nail.
Is that what he said?
Yeah, he said it's not like Little Walter or something, man.
Right.
I don't need. I need somebody who I know is gonna be
there. Yeah. Right. Because he'd had enough flaky musicians.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But so I can see. I
that
believe
totally
that.
makes
I believe
sense,
that. And.
I'd never heard you say this before.
Well, because I never put it together.
Never put it together, yeah.
And which was totally cool because the idiot I was then.
It would have been a mess.
It would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
I'd have killed somebody or got killed or something.
Something
really
bad would have happened
because I did not need Muddy Waters co-signing how cool I thought I, imagined I was and shit, man.